Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2:01, and I believe, just looking formally, we need just a couple more members to join, so that way we can have quorum. So I'm just going to let it kind of marinate for another couple of minutes before we start the meeting. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's 14:03 on, day is today, December 15th, 2021. I'd like to call the State of Nevada Interstate Legislative Committee to order and ask the admin assistant to call the roll.
Good morning. Dave Bogerson,
Present.
Janine Freeman,
Here.
Mike Allen, Ron Bollier, Todd Carlini,
Here.
That's not what we had.
Brett Compton,
Here.
Kelly Echeverra,
She's here.
Mike Heidemann,
Mike is present.
Jeremy Hines,
Here.
Sam Hicks, Carrie Lee, Bill Merwin, Don Pelt, Deb Pierce, Ken Quiner,
Here.
Billy Samuels,
Present.
James Walker,
Here.
Mike Wilson.
Here.
All right, we have 11, so we do have quorum.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 2 on the agenda. This is public comment, discussion only. No action may be taken upon a matter raised under this item of the agenda until the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an item upon which action may be taken. Public comments may be limited to 3 minutes per person at discretion of chair. Comments will not be restricted based on viewpoint. If you're following along with us on YouTube, you do have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. But if you're here with us in the Zoom environment, just go ahead and unmute yourself and provide any public comment you might have. And YouTube is about 30 seconds behind us, so we kind of rattle a little bit to make sure that anybody that is watching from the public has a chance to give any public comment. So any public comment from anybody in the Zoom environment? Okay, hearing none on the Zoom environment. Anybody on the telephone, *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, nothing on the telephone and here in the Carson office. Any public comment? I do have a public comment that we do have a change in the organizational structure at the division. We promoted John Backendall effective Monday to the deputy administrator's position. He's gonna be responsible for the preparedness section and the mission support section, what we previously called interoperability. We renamed it mission support so everyone would actually kind of get a better idea of what it does. And we will, at the next meeting, we'll change the chair for myself to John, trying to split some of the duties of some of these committees and assign some committees to John, the chair. So your next meeting, your chairperson will be John Backendall. Any additional public comment? Okay, we'll move to item number 3. This is approval of minutes. This is a discussion, possible action. Committee will discuss and review the minutes of the March 29th, 2021 committee meeting. Committee may vote to amend and approve or approve the minutes as provided. And those minutes were in your packets. Does anybody have any recommended changes to the minutes or a motion to approve as provided?
Jeannie Freeman for the record. I make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 29, 2021 meeting of the Imac.
Mike Wilson, second.
First from Jeannie, a second from Mike. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item number 4, introduction of new IMAC members. Discussion only. We will discuss our new members, and I'm not going to read the agenda item because it kind of takes away the whole thunder of who's on the committee. So I'm going to kind of do a twofold thing and welcome our new committee members with Ken from the Washoe Tribe of Nevada. He is their emergency manager and is also with us on some other groups as well, and has been a great addition. Came in immediately before the Caldera incident, just a month or so ahead of that, and got a pretty good welcoming to the emergency management world. And we appreciate Kim joining the committee with us to talk about mutual aid and especially representing all of our 27 tribal colonies and tribal nations in the state, and trying to expand our additions of how many are members of the Imass system for us. Also welcoming Rodney Wright. He is with the division. He's our search and rescue coordinator, also our state exercise officer. Many of you have known him through all of COVID because he was working for the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Behavioral Health, and then we swiped him from them about a year ago. He's probably pretty close to getting off probation within a month or so. February, really close. So welcome to the committee, and Rodney will share his experiences with search and rescue and how that impacts the mutual aid system in Nevada, because that's an area where we probably don't look at very well, and he can hopefully add some of that context for us. And then last but absolutely not least, Kelly, the emergency manager for Washoe County, who's been around between the Red Cross and the Washoe County emergency manager assistant, and now the Washoe County emergency manager through all of COVID, or a majority of COVID. So she can bring the Northern Nevada perspective and some of that all the goodness that we see out of Washoe County and all the different political bodies that she gets to filter up their information in the state. So welcome and congratulations to the 3 new members of our committee. They are giving you guys all a round of applause on Zoom. You can't see that. Any discussion from anybody? Anybody wants to give an award speech that they've been adopted to the committee or anything like that?
Thanks.
Okay, moving to item number 5. This is approval of the Imac bylaws. This is a discussion and possible action. Committee will discuss and review the minutes. And there is a problem with the agenda here. It says that we will discuss and review the minutes from the March 29th, 2021 meeting. Committee may vote to amend and approve the minutes provided. Since the agenda does not absolutely accurately represent the agenda item, I'm going to table this agenda item and we will deal with this next meeting and have the correct agenda item written out. In the meantime, between now and the next meeting, if you want to take a look at the bylaws that are presented, and if you have any change of those, get some informal notes back to us and make sure that at the next meeting we can actually adopt those. And I apologize, as soon as I read that, I realized it's incorrect. So we will get that fixed and agendized correctly for the next meeting.
Chair, this is Billy Samuels.
Go ahead, Billy.
I just got a quick question. I don't know if, and this could, again, it's just kind of discussion, but it's not really any actionable. Do we need to change the names on the chairman and the vice chair on the bylaws just going forward, just so instead of having redundancy on paperwork next time, just something to think about.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6. This is a review of the Interstate Mutual Aid System Policies and Procedures Guide. This is discussion only from Eric Wilson. He will lead us on a review of the policy procedures for Imass. The committee will review and discuss Imass policies and procedures for possible adoption at our next meeting. Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon, everybody. You should have that policy and procedures in front of you. We'll start out on page 3. It has the introduction, talks about the mutual aids agreements, chapter 414, the history behind it. It talks about the purpose of the Imass. The next page, on page 4, it talks about the Imass organization, and it goes through the local, through the emergency manager, describes the state mutual aid coordinator, state duty officers, and the IMAC committee itself. It also talks about the Imass participants and responsibilities, both the requesting participant responsibilities and the assisting. Talks about opting in and opting out. On page 6, it goes into the procedures for both the local, the county, and the tribal. And then on the next page, it goes up to the regional. And then on the following page, on 8, it talks about statewide. At the bottom of page 8, it talks about the Imass Forms. The forms being basically the resource request form that we use. It is also in Appendix E in the back on page 21. You can have a link to the resource request form. On page 9, it talks more about the resource request form and the predefined resources, basically through NIMS. On page 10, it has the Imass rates, which are basically the establishment of the standardized rates. It reiterates that NRS 414A states that participants are required to provide an annual inventory of resources available for mutual aid. At the bottom of the page, it goes into the Imass reimbursement process and talks about the assisting participants and the requirements there. The cost reimbursement needs to be submitted within 60 days after the completion of the activities. And now it talks about the responsibilities of the requesting participant. At the bottom of that page, it talks about the dispute resolution, the steps that should be followed. And then on the back, starting at page 12, are the different appendixes or appendi. Appendi A is authorities and references. Appendix B, you have the acronyms that are explained and the definitions as well. It moves through all those through to page 18, where it talks about the resources typing toolkit for female resource typing. Following page talks about the rates, both the local rates, the tribal rates, state to territorial rates, and the FEMA rates, and how they're developed. And then on the last page are the resource request forms. Are there any questions or issues or anything that anybody wants to bring up, or we can review them and discuss them at the next meeting for adoption?
Jeannie Freeman for the record. In going through the document, there are a variety of typos and stuff within the document, and I have some questions. So I'm curious, do you want the typos submitted here in public meeting where we go through them so that they can be identified? Or I don't know if Sam's in the room, if we're allowed to submit them to Eric directly, not to the whole committee, but just to Eric.
If it's just the typos, we can take those offline. Anything substantial to it, we'll talk about in the committee, but if it's the typos, we can take those offline, so we're not eating up the committee's time for that.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions, however, if I may follow up, please.
Please.
Okay, on page 4, under Imass participants and responsibilities, in the NRS 414A.120, it talks about mandates of all public agencies, including political subdivisions, school districts, and special districts participating in Imass. I am not familiar, and I do realize that schools are included. I'm just not familiar with there being outreach that's been done with schools for them to know that they are included in this. And I don't know if that's just because with the lapse of everything with COVID, but maybe there has been that communication. I'm just not familiar with schools being aware of their participation. Does anybody have any fill-in or information related to that?
Mike Wilson from Clark County School District. You want to give us an opinion on that? Because I know before we had the chief of staff at Clark County School District on this committee as well.
I would say that other school districts are probably not aware of this.
Okay, we'll do some outreach, and maybe that ties into that thing of having a monthly school emergency manager meeting. We can talk about it there. I believe, Mike, there's only 2 true school emergency managers in the state, maybe 3, Carson, Washoe, and Clark. And everybody else is truly a dual-hatted deputy superintendent, associate superintendent, principal, somebody else that's also has a collateral duty, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
So Jeannie, if you remember, for the record, a suggestion that I would have is maybe having a conversation with the State Department of Education and having this be something that's presented at this with the state superintendents, just so that they're aware, because in some districts they use a risk manager, and other districts that's the school nurse and that type of thing. They don't really have that outlined. So I'm just curious. It's just a suggestion for that to maybe be an outreach point. Another comment that I have is on page 9, at the top of page 9, when it talks about the resource request form for DEM. The opening line there says, upon receiving an Imass resource request form. And in reading that, that just gives the impression that there is a separate request form when it's interstate mutual aid than the typical DEM resource request form. And a suggestion would be to modify the verbiage there so that it doesn't sound like it is a separate form, but is one and the same.
That can be done.
And then a question, a follow-up question that I have related to some of the things that are in here, and it may just be that I need to be educated on it, and I appreciate the education if need be. There's quite a few things within the document that are referring to Imac. And as far as different documents and processes, and most of that comes in with like the definitions or so like under the definitions, they have the interstate reimbursement R1 form, the interstate reimbursement R2 forms. I question whether or not that and the requisition A form, if this is the appropriate document for them to be in, or if this is meant to tie into and lead into the Imac documents and stuff as well. So I'm just, since this is intrastate mutual aid, I just want to make sure that we're not having confusion. And again, that might need to be my education.
So Jeannie, thank you. This is John. That's exactly where the basis came from, was the Imac, and that's the forms we used to use. So Lenita and Kelly Barati before her, and now Eric has taken on developing those forms, but changing a lot of it to meet the intrastate need. So it is time to modify that language. So no education needed. Great catch by you. It's the process we used to use, but we're getting ready to demonstrate and show to you guys some new forms and the way that we're going to use them moving forward.
Great, thank you, John. And then the other items related to verbiage and typos and stuff like that, I will send to Eric offline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Jeannie, it's Lenita. The intent of combining those forms is that we should have the same form and the same submittal system, regardless of whether it's an intrastate or an interstate deployment of resources. We wanted it to try to be a little bit more user-friendly for those on the back end filling out the financial documentation.
And that 100% makes sense. It's just wanting to make sure that that terminology is in there so that it addresses both and it doesn't seem like it is something separate. So I appreciate that explanation. I appreciate that. Thank you.
thank you, Jeannie. Great comments. Does anybody else have any feedback on the revision? Because it has been substantially revised from the last edition we looked at. A bunch of people have looked at it to try to clean it up from the multiple page document to make it a little smaller for us. But,
Yeah, Chief Carlini here, East Fork.
Go right ahead, Todd.
Sorry, lost my place here. On page 5, number 3, it just talks about participants who have opted out, yet it lists people who have opted in. That's just, I think, clean up there. And then on page 10, the discussion there about participants providing an annual inventory of resources available. I'm just wondering, does anyone know what kind of a compliance percentage we have amongst the participants who have done that? That's question one on that. Is that can someone answer that, or do we know?
Yes, I could talk to the, we don't have a very good compliance rate on that right now. I don't have an exact rate, but I would say that it's very low.
And then following that up, are there any plans with DEM or for DEM to try to get back onto that effort of resource typing with all of those different participants? I don't know if that's a piece of the problem or not, but is that something that's been considered, Dave?
So I know what you're talking about, because back probably 10 years ago, DEM actually hired a contractor to go to local jurisdictions and do the inventories of all their resources. And that has not been re-upped. And obviously we have the EMPG money we provide to each county that can take care of that at your side as well. But we can look in to see if there's some resources on our end to do that, to increase that ability. Eric's just really getting back into this after going through COVID. So he can start looking at some options of whether we ask the locals to take care of that as part of the EMPG funding we provide you, or if we can provide some additional assistance through some contract staff. And I do know that there's a problem with that contractor that was used by the state. Not every jurisdiction got the same level of love and care as the others.
Yeah, that's a very tactful way of putting it.
I can't learn some things, Todd.
Congratulate you on being able to say that tactfully. I think that's one of the real challenges with this, and at the same time, it becomes probably the one of the single things that really moves this whole concept forward for DEM is to have that availability to inventory all of those resources when it comes time to push them out. And I think unless we're able to somehow commit to that, and I know I could even tell you, I'm sure Douglas County is probably even the ones that's is just as delinquent with all the special districts and things that we have. But I don't know. I think that's one of the areas of focus that needs to be brought to bear on really making this agreement function as it was intended, especially for your shop.
Absolutely, because when this was all first designed, they were really looking at from the fire side of the things, and that's where NIMS typing, was very simple and very easy to do. But now what we're trying to do is be able to figure out who needs a Type 3 grader and who has a Type 3 grader, and especially when we start looking at floods and mud flow and all the other disasters we deal with. And you're absolutely spot on. I mean, the whole reason why 414A was written was to get those special districts in this process as well. So we'll have to figure out some outreach with that, maybe work with NACO, League of Cities, and I believe there's also a special general improvement district group too. So maybe we can reach out to those folks and get that. And John and I are having a sidebar conversation. We do think we'll have some money to accomplish some of this, to help this year in some of our grant processes, so we can reach out to those people that we would think is non-traditional responders to get their data as well. So great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just one or two more points here really quick. I just thought of them. Are there any changes in NRS 414A that need to be procedurally memorialized here that may not have been captured that's anyone's aware of?
Last session, the only thing we changed before 14A was that we moved from Department of Public Safety to Office of Military, and I think that's represented in the document. So anything else would be going back to session before, and I don't think we changed anything there. Obviously, I wasn't working here at the state, but collectively as emergency manager, I don't think we changed anything.
Okay. I was just checking because I saw the reference here to that, and I think that might be it, Dave. Thanks.
And one of the items we might do is, and this was created with the 414A or shortly thereafter, is the Imac team. So maybe we look at having, and I'll punt this to Lanita to think about, offline do we put the IMAT into here, make an appendix into here, or do we make it a book so that way we don't get people confused? And so Lanita can work on that, what works best for that, because that would be the part of mutual aid that isn't truly addressed in here for the two state teams that we are developing. Anybody else have any feedback on the procedures?
Jeremy Hines, City of Henderson. I had a question in regards to initially when we were doing the Imass, when it was prior to being fully formed, we talked about doing a traveling outreach across the state. I don't know if that ever happened, and if it did, I don't remember it ever actually being fully deployed out. So that's my first question. Are we going to continue to do that for full understanding of this document, as well as if there is any training or exercising that needs to be added to this document to keep efficiency and accuracy up? Or is it just going to be a policy or procedure that's just added into the rest of the policies and procedures?
Good question on the rollout part of it. That I think that's where we go back to that contract that we're talking about to not only get the resources in, but then also to reach out to the non-traditional responders. And some of that, we're also looking at you as the city emergency manager to make sure your city folks have got it, the county emergency managers to reach out to their general improvement districts to get the word out. Because I guess I'm looking for the whole community approach that we can get the contractor hopefully to help start put some more resources into the system, but all of us got to be responsible to make sure we're gathering that data in and making sure those folks are aware of it. And we can put a training and exercise piece into this, but if we do it here, or is it better in the IPPW? Is that the IPPW would be better off there? So that way it's because
I don't want to put something else mandatory in the system, but it was kind of a consideration. I don't know if I really don't think it should be in the document. It's just something I wanted to bring up. If it's something that we want to integrate into future exercises through the IPPW, I think that would be smart, but I just wanted to bring it up just so we have it on record that we talked about it.
No, I concur with you. And that's, I guess I was trying to beat around the bush there, is that I don't want to put in that every emergency manager must train people on this process, because really those of us on the committee know this document exists, and nobody else is going to know this document exists until they got to pull it out because they're using it. And so if we could add it into something that people are going to see more frequently, like the IPPW, that might be a better place, and make sure that our exercises have that component into it. It might be a better idea than putting something in this document itself. Thoughts from everybody else in the room and on Zoom?
I agree.
Judy Freeman, for the record, I agree.
Yeah, Chair, this is Billy. Me and John Backthal were talking about the same kind of concept Jeremy was just discussing regarding the policy and procedures, how it goes through with the request for reimbursement prior to an event occurring. So I think we're all on board. I like Jeremy's idea on going through each county and city and corporations, but I think me and John are going to be working on that coming in the next year anyways.
Awesome. Jimmy Walker, do you got your hand up too?
Yeah, I do. It's not on that same subject though. Just something else I wanted to bring up on this. So
okay.
If we're not done with that yet, I can wait.
Anybody else have any feedback on what Jeremy just provided? If not, we'll move on to Jim. Okay, go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
Okay. The question I had was on page 7 of the document here. In a couple of places, both under the county tribal section, under the regional section, it says on there that when they're talking about coordinating mutual aid, it says coordinating mutual aid may have a period of time that is without expectation of reimbursement unless expressly provided for. It says that in both of those areas. And the question I have on that basically is when I read that each time, it implies to me that we're setting the expectation that mutual aid that's expected out there is not going to be looked for reimbursement unless it's prearranged. Where the way I understand it is generally the expectation is that any mutual aid you request or any resources you request, you're expected to be ready to pay for those unless there's a previous arrangement for that. It should be the other way around. And I just kind of concerned about the fact that it seems to give the implication that requesting mutual aid is going to initially have the expectation of not needing to be reimbursed when it shouldn't be that way around. So I'm just suggesting kind of a rewording of that so that it doesn't set an initial expectation for not having to request or not expecting requestment for reimbursement for mutual aid.
Good point. We'll take a look at 414A to see what it says, because that's the whole purpose of mutual aid. Mutual aid is without expectation of reimbursement until you exceed a time frame, and then it becomes that assistance for hire. You know, if we call up and ask you for mutual aid, that is the, you know, it's free, but then, you know, a lot of places will do a 12-hour, 24-hour, or 4-hour block. So point well taken. We'll take a look at 414A to see if there's any language in there about that time period and make sure that the language matches what the law is directing us to do and what is common practice for mutual aid.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments for Eric on his document?
This is Ken from the Washoe Tribe. I just had a quick question about the opting in requirements. Is there a specific letter that's expected from the tribes, or I know we only have 4 tribes that have opted in on this document. Is it perhaps unclarity on how to opt in or how to opt out? Not.
Hey, Ken, it's John back at all. So yeah, all it takes is a tribal resolution in the formal format. If you would like a sample of one, we can send you some from one of the 4 tribes that has opted in. And then you're in place after that, and we'll include you in the group of opt-ins.
Yeah, the formal resolution is not a question. Just wanted, it's requesting a formal resolution to opt in. Might be something to clarify in here, as
Okay.
opposed to a phone call, email.
Point taken. Thank you.
And we can look at 414A and see what the language is and make sure we hear that language there. And I know we talk about that every INTEC meeting, and I know our INTEC staff is always out talking to our tribal partners about that. We want to get more participation there, because you don't have to do the mutual aid, but we want you in the system, so if you need it, it's there. Or if you'd like to provide mutual aid, it's there. So good question, Ken. We'll clean that up.
Thank you.
Anybody with anything else? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Nice work through the multiple people who've been going through that to try to clean it up. So thank you all for doing that. We'll move on to item number 7. Now, this is presentation on real world events. This is discussion only with Lenita McGee. The committee will discuss real world incidents. You wouldn't think that would be that hard of a sentence to say. And events occurring from April 2021 through October 2021, for which DEM and Homeland Security has deployed resources to assist local jurisdictions, include the Caldera Fire, Get Out the Vaccine Drive, mobile vaccine units north and south, and other COVID incidents. Ms. McGee will also provide an update on DEM efforts to field an IMAC team as set forth under NRS 414.080.
So good afternoon, everyone. Lenita McGee. Obviously, if we're busy, you guys are about 20 times as busy as we are. So it continues to be our honor and privilege to be able to support you on these efforts. We'll go through from the state perspective as to what kind of resources we were able to provide and support we were able to send out. The mobile vaccination units, we were the first state in the nation to not only have 1 mobile vaccination unit, but actually 2. We were able to put shots in arms of approximately 6,500 people across the state, to include our tribal partner agencies and those who might not have access through usual means. So we're pretty proud of that. That required what's called a whole community effort. That's a fancy term that FEMA uses to make sure that we're integrating our federal, state, local, tribal, and non-governmental organizations, and we did that to a T. We had a couple of hiccups, being weather across the state. We had everything from snowstorms to heat-related incidents on day 1, and then we were given the pause of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine about 3/4 of the way through the incident. So we had to pause on that, regroup. We were able to, within 24 hours, turn around, thanks to some really good work from our ESF8 partners, and make sure that we were able to extend those routes to come back and offer the second shot, since the 1-shot dose was no longer available. That extended the mission by approximately 2.5 weeks, which took us out to about 6.5 week operation. That was a big deal to get those 6,500 shots in the arms of folks. It took a whole community / multiple partner effort. It was the first all hazards deployment in the history of the state. We had Truckee Meadows, Nevada Highway Patrol, Imass Nevada, Team Rubicon, the Nevada National Guard, Carson City Fire, Clark County Fire, Tahoe Douglas Fire, Sparks Fire, and numerous volunteers assisting us on that effort. So it was really cool to be able to see all those representatives, including our tribal partners. They were able to send some resources to assist with that. Our Get Out the Vax operation was also incredibly successful. Part of the using it as a case study moving forward. That happened on the mobile vaccination unit as well. There were a lot of states that were following on in our footsteps, and along those efforts, we were sharing with them continually what some of the strengths and the challenges were to make sure that they were able to replicate the successes and learn from the mistakes that we made and adjust accordingly. So we had a lot of real world conversations with multiple states. For the Get Out the Vax, there were 436 total outreach efforts that were supported. 343,592 materials were distributed. 256 total vaccines were administered at Department of Motor Vehicles after hours. So these are folks coming to get their registration or their driver's license or whatever the case may be, who chose to opt in to get the vaccine. 22 zip codes were completely canvassed, including those that were high priority, low vaccination rates. We had 448 total interactions with access and functional needs populations and 1,595 COVID-19 tests administered at the UNLV Stan Fulton operation. There were lots of community interaction activities. And again, we were able to touch a lot of folks that might not normally have had access to the educational materials or the subject matter expertise that these folks brought to the table to help them understand why getting the vaccination was so important to helping us get out of the COVID efforts. Our third major incident was the Caldera Fire. Again, that was the first time we've ever deployed a task force from multiple entities. We brought a task force up from the south, including Clark County Fire, North Las Vegas, Pahrump Fire, and Billy, who am I missing? There's one more. City of Las Vegas. City of Las Vegas, that were brought up for the first time ever. We used those to backfill the community response stations because those units are not wildland fire assets. By backfilling the community response stations up at those locations, Incline Village, Tahoe Douglas, East Fork, and Carson City, we were able to push out additional wildland fire trained personnel to actually respond to the fire. In a 50-hour stand, those assets were able to save the town of Myers, which is about 20,000 people. So it goes to show you that simply bringing up one task force can make a huge difference, not just to a community, but to the livelihood of that community and the people that are being impacted. So we were greatly appreciative of our Southern Nevada partners willing to take a chance and deploy resources to assist with that. We also had great partnerships from the Nevada Department of Transportation, our ESF 13 partners, including the Nevada Highway Patrol. We had representatives from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and the Carson City Sheriff's Office in our State Emergency Operations Center to make sure that we were continuing to coordinate and communicate on traffic control points, road closures, et cetera. So it's a great representation. And of course, we could not have done it without our ESF 6 mass care partners who were helping care for the evacuees. As you know, the fire was completely in California. It was headed to us, never actually made it, which was a good thing, but we ended up sheltering multiple evacuees and their pets. That created a lot of challenges, but we were able to do it pretty successfully with very few hiccups. So kudos to those that were involved in that. COVID operations continue to date. We're at resource order 5,486. That's from the beginning of last year. Those are all resource request forms that have been processed here in the State Emergency Operations Center. Everything from tests to personal protective equipment to National Guard members, light kits, et cetera, to ensure that we're able to support you guys. And then the warehouses work underneath the operations section. So all of those orders have been fulfilled in some way, shape, or form using the resources that we had on hand or some creative thinking and partnerships by utilizing you guys out in the field. So we appreciate your continued faith and confidence and patience as we work through those efforts. For future efforts for the incident management team, we have our first fully credentialed all hazards person here in the state of Nevada. We're super proud of that. Sergeant Lauren Carell is with the Nevada Highway Patrol. So not only is he the first fully credentialed person, he happens to be a cop, which those of you at ICS know it's pretty unique to have a cop that has grown to embrace and appreciate this. He is fully credentialed as a Type 3 Operations Section Chief, and he's one class away from being fully credentialed as a incident commander for a Type 3 all hazards incident or event as well. So super proud of that. A lot of hard work and a lot of partnerships went into making that happen, including those of you that were participatory in classes and or events and incidents leading towards that. Our class offerings thus far, we have had 8 position-specific classes, not including Incident Command System 3 and 400 since April 1st. We have 5 additional classes scheduled before March 31st. Those are all position-specific classes to make sure that we continue to build our all hazards IMT capability here in the state of Nevada. We have a informal inquiry right now from the state of Kentucky for response to their tornadoes. I sent it out on the listserv yesterday. We're up to probably about 23 or 24 people that have responded, either asking questions or fully committing to go out. What happens with that process now as part of the Emergency Management Assistance Compact is once we build the mission ready package, we submit that to Kentucky, and it's up to them to decide whether or not they want to take us up on our offer. As I said in the email, this is going to be a long-term response for them. So while we may not get a shot right out the door, I would imagine at some point, due to the devastation, if you've seen any of it, and the amount of stress that those folks are experiencing, that at some point we will be able to send someone, whether it's a short team or something along those lines. So ready, willing, and able to support those folks if the need should arise. We continue to work through formalizing the incident management assistance teams per NRS 414.080. The application process is almost complete. The standard operating guidelines are almost complete. Once those are done, they'll be pushed out on the listserv for review and or input to make sure that we're going along the right lines. We are not reinventing the wheel. We're stealing from other people that have come before us and using their best practices so that we can continue to get our program up and running. And we continue to maintain that tentative team 4 on the supplemental response team for a federal government response, which would be something like the Kentucky tornadoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, whatever the case may be. Our state training website went live on July 1st. That is appropriate to this IMT discussion because the second phase of that is the credentialing process. So once we get that part up and running, we're working with our vendor right now. We will have the ability to input credentials into that system so that we can immediately go and query the system as opposed to using the listserv right now and figure out who we have, what positions they can fulfill, and how quickly we can deploy them. So it'll make it a lot more streamlined for us as we move throughout the process. We're continuing to evolve DEM supportive field operations through training and exercise. I think you've seen, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from you guys, our partners in the field. We're here to support your needs, your training and exercise. It's not the other way around. We worked really hard to make sure that we're asking you what you need as opposed to assuming that we know what you need. And along those same lines, you're going to start seeing more of our personnel present at meetings, training, and exercise, including local emergency planning committees that you guys have seen recently. We'll have some personnel engaged in New Year's Eve operations down in Las Vegas so that we can continue to familiarize ourselves with your operations and ensure that we're able to support you. And all of those will tie back into that incident management assistance team operation. That is the end of my report. Oh, one more thing. Super Bowl 58 was just announced today. That is 2024. If you haven't heard the good news, it's not really good news, but we'll pretend like it's good news. Creates a lot of additional work. We do have access to other plans for organizations and jurisdictions that have come before us. So if you want to let us know if you want those, we're happy to share those. Again, it's another opportunity to not reinvent the wheel, but to learn from others' best practices and or challenges that they may have faced. That being said, that's the end of my report, pending any questions.
Well, it's a good thing you've had experience in this field.
That's why I said it wasn't good news, Jeremy.
Hey, Lenita, it's Billy.
Hi, Billy.
You're talking about the credentialing. We're talking about the PIP cards. I think I might have misheard. Are we still working on that program, or what does that look like?
So yeah, two different things, Billy. Credentialing, and as I was talking to in this context, is all hazards planning section chief, operations section chief, incident commander. The PIVI credentialing, which is the federal ID cards, for those of you that aren't aware, that process continues. Nevada remains a beta test partner in that site. It's actually been transitioned to Eric Wilson. He is the lead now, but we still continue to credential folks. Nevada Task Force 1, we still have some outliers according to them, especially with the program management change that occurred recently. But the short answer, Billy, is we're going to continue pushing forward with that program, including integrating it into your, I'm going to mispronounce it, JETI. Jeremy, did I get that right? It's no longer JETI.
It's JEDI.
JEDI. Okay. Your Joint Emergency Training Institute. They've already reached out to us and asked us if we would be willing to allow them to use that at their facility. And the answer was, of course, yes, because we want to continue to integrate these cards into systems statewide.
Okay, just want to make sure that if anything we can do to help or assist, that we can keep that ball moving. I think it's a good idea. So
that'd be great. And Eric is listening to this, and I'm sure he'll be in touch with you shortly.
Any other questions or comments for Lenita? Okay, we'll move on to item number 8. This is a brief down the Imass reimbursement forms discussion only. Mr. Wilson will discuss the new Imass reimbursement forms.
Good afternoon, everybody, again. These are the Imass reimbursement forms that you should have in front of you. They're basically based off of the Imac reimbursement forms. All credit goes to Kelly Barati, who developed these and I think did a great job. Moving through it really quickly, if you look at the tabs down at the bottom, it basically has all the different forms and information that you need to fill out down there in the tabs. It has the backfill labor, has the shifting, I'm sorry. It has the basic information, and in the first tab, if you go to it, it has the invoice. So it'll have all the totals there. The next one has the contact info. Deployed labor, where you put the forced labor account, deployed labor. Backfill is the next tab. Shift information.
And Eric, Bain, I wrote 1 minute, just that way anybody doesn't looking at the agenda. This is an Excel document that has all that in there, correct? That way we can make sure it's on the record.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you're talking tabs, you're talking tabs within
Tabs
Excel.
within Excel sheet. Yes, sir. Then there's the benefit calculator. The next tab is the travel tab. Then it has the meals, equipment with the hours or the dates used, total miles, depending on how you use it, what equipment it was. Has the materials, rental, and contracts. And then it has incident hours, an incident mileage form for agency vehicles. It also has a standard checklist that explains all these different tabs and comes with the reimbursement form. We can have discussion right now. If you take a look at it and read it, come up with any suggestions, corrections, or issues, and let me know. Email me directly and I'll implement them. And we'll discuss it and we can look at it for adoption at the next meeting.
Hey, Eric, this is Kelly Echevarria for the record. Hey, I was looking at this document with our animal services team in regards to Caldera Fire. And they had a lot of questions that I couldn't answer. So mostly around the cost of utilizing kennel space and providing care for animals. Okay. It really wasn't clear on where something like that would go. I thought maybe equipment, because it did talk about the equipment tab, I think it was, talked about, maybe it wasn't equipment. It was materials, sorry, because it was materials, goods, or services, but we weren't sure. So I don't know if maybe you could clarify something like that. If it's a service that's provided in the cost of the service, where that would come.
So Kelly, this is John. You're gonna have to break that up into 3 different spots for that type of resource, similar to a wildland fire piece of equipment, any apparatus they send out. There's the equipment, the device itself, the supplies that they may burn through, as well as the manpower hours associated with manning that device. So for any mobile resource like that, including a vet trailer, it would absolutely have to fall into that to make sure they get full reimbursement. Now, if they're not looking for reimbursement on the device, they wouldn't fill that out. But if they burned through 14 pounds of kitty litter, 18 bags of dog food, then they want to get reimbursed for that, plus whatever man hours are associated with that particular apparatus. That's the way they would break it out.
So I think that the way that they do it is just they charge the cost of running the kennel, which probably includes all of that. But so you're saying they need to break that down, the kennel cost?
It does, because if their cost is over what the national going rate would be, it's going to be denied, or it would be cut to the actual going rate. So I know it's easier for everybody to lump it all into one, but we don't get reimbursed for that, and then neither would the party that we're trying to reimburse, the local government. So the better it's broken out and the more justification there is with it, the better your opportunity is for reimbursement to that agency.
I think one of the things we need to do is once we get these documents approved by the committee, then we need to do some training with not only the emergency managers, but also local government fiscal folks, and maybe record that training. So that way then as people change, they go to the website and they can click on a link and watch that video on how to do this. Or we did training a day and you don't use these forms for 3 years and all of a sudden you're looking at forms again. We can probably produce something along those lines to make sure that, I think the first part is to get the forms. Hey, these forms work. They're what we need. Let's approve them. And then the next phase is the rollout, which would be the training component of it.
So Chief, that's also something that I talked about with the team yesterday, was in making sure that we capture exactly what you just said in our IPPW tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Kelly,
Jeremy,
this is John again. This is also something we can bring up at your LEPC meetings and start some facilitation through there. And then as we move forward, hold routine workshops to make sure everybody's in tune, because this stuff's not going away. We're actually going to start using this system, and I think we're going to use it a lot more often as disasters become more frequent. So it gives us an opportunity to get it out there and practice it, and then also help you guys through the process instead of saying, figure it out. There's going to be someone that'll help you walk through it.
yeah, Jeremy Hines for the record. I agree with everything that's being said. Also the rate sheets. I imagine our finance folks don't know how much a going rate for a pet trailer is going to be for deployment. So we need to figure out if we need to start putting a pricing menu, a rate sheet menu together based on what those current rates are, because I have no idea what a current rate of a pet trailer would be. And maybe you guys can help us out with that.
That's a great point. And the discussion that Dave and I had about hiring a contractor to go out and facilitate the inventory of your resources that are going to be deployable. This is the perfect opportunity to have that contractor assign the going rate while we're there. So you guys fully understand, this is your package, this is what the reimbursement schedule is going to be. And then we can enter it into the system, or no, animal services doesn't want to include that because it's not worth their time. Whatever that may be, we can work through it at that time through that coordinated effort.
And I believe even though FEMA's got going rates, we can still charge as long as we can prove that the rate local is justified. We can still pay a higher fee. So just because FEMA says that type 1 engine's $40 an hour doesn't mean that it is going to be $40 an hour unless you can't prove otherwise. It's
So-
like the default answer piece, right?
So it's Lanita, and the other thing you have to remember is not everything is typed and priced. So like a pet trailer, I would imagine is not in there, but there's some other devices that we're going to come up with. So as long as the contractor can validate and verify why it's that amount for money and we have it documented, then we can go back and we can provide that documentation for reimbursement purposes.
Awesome.
Yep. The other thing to remember about that document is it auto calculates. So the invoice on the very front page is a compilation of everything else that you input on every other tab throughout. So the invoice is the first thing that we see that gives us the total amount, and that's based on the auto calculations that are going on throughout the document. Again, this is our desire to make it one reimbursement package, regardless of whether it's interstate or intrastate as to where it's going. Chief Blackman in Clark County, a couple of folks in Carson City and Douglas County have worked with this process recently as a result of recent incidents. And so we'll pull them too as far as best practices and challenges that they faced before we roll out this training program for you all to make sure that we can answer all of the questions accordingly.
I think one of the challenges when we do that training, and that's, I think, where we're coming up here, some of these questions make really good sense to fiscal people. Oh yeah, equipment versus services, yeah. But if you're not a fiscal person and you're an emergency manager, you're like, well, what's the difference? It cost me $50.
Right.
And so we almost gotta translate between those two worlds with for those people in the classes when we do that.
Correct. Yeah, and I will tell you too, since I have all of your attention, with equipment and rentals, you can't just go out and rent stuff and expect somebody to turn around and write you a check for it. There has to be conversations. We've had a whole lot of small, medium, and large purchases submitted that were never, permission was not asked, and we're not going to turn around and ask for those to be reimbursed. So those are conversations that we're going to have when you look at the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. You actually have to have permission before you go out and incur cost on behalf of the incident. So those are different little training aspects that will roll into this entire training program.
Jeannie Freeman for the record. Following up on that, not just with the pricing aspects of it, but when the training piece comes in, suggestion would be to have a tabletop built into that training piece, not just a presentation about what they should be doing, but a tabletop exercise, in the sense that a lot of times our fiscal folks, like you mentioned, they aren't doing this all the time, or somebody in fiscal just gets assigned to that role. They're not maybe totally trained on what a finance section chief or a finance and admin unit leader should be doing. And not everybody's really familiar with the CFR 200, which is a gigantic piece of all of that. And so I think that there's more to it. Not that DEM is responsible for the training and the expectation of what should be done on a local level and what the locals need to have in place, but a more robust, rather than a, hey, we're going to give a presentation about this is what this looks like, but more about how to actually practice it from time to time. That fiscal piece doesn't often get exercised, even when we do statewide exercises or local exercises. They're just kind of a position that sits there and twiddles their thumbs for the period of time that the exercise is occurring. And I think really pushing it more and having it stamped denied actually helps people learn from that experience, because I think there's a lot of things that get denied and they don't understand why until we're in a bad situation and don't know where to get that money from.
So if you guys can figure out a way to bring your finance people to the table, we will offer training all day long. We can do, a couple of hour workshops, a full day workshop, whatever the case may be. They don't have to sit through a 3-day finance and admin unit leader course, but we can put together some just-in-time training that's modeled to their needs. But we need you all helping us bring folks to the table. I appreciate your graciousness that we're not responsible for that, but ultimately, if you're sending your request to us, then we owe it to you to make sure that you're successful on the front end of that.
So a follow up on that, Lenita, thanks for that. One of the other things that I think is really important, and just recently from personal experience, I took that finance and admin unit leader class that was offered up in the north, and I know that they're going to offer it down in the south. That class was absolutely phenomenal. And it is a class that your operations section chief should be taking, your logistics section chief should take, your IC should take, because everybody needs to understand what needs to be going to that finance unit for them to be successful, so that for that emergency, for that payment to be there. If you don't understand it and you're in one of those other positions, you're setting that unit up for failure, in addition to what the challenges are that are already in front of them. And so quite honestly, I don't know if that class is full in the South, but it was one of the best classes I have ever taken when it comes to trainings. Maybe it's just because I feel like that's my bailiwick and that's where I should be headed in life. But quite honestly, everybody who's in any kind of position from your IC onto all the other general staff positions should be taking that class so that they have a better understanding of how to make sure that that unit is successful for the overall emergency.
Thanks for that, Jeannie. I appreciate that. Do me a favor, put that in a quick email for me as to exactly the justification you just said, and I'll send it out statewide and see if maybe we can, grab some more interest. Not everybody's interested in that, but if they understand it from your perspective, perhaps they might be a little bit more willing to sign up for the class.
Sure, my opinion's worth about a half a penny, but we'll go with it.
It works. It works.
All of our half a pennies together, Jeannie, we can get at least a handful of people in the north.
Correct.
Great discussion. Anything else on the IMAS reimbursement forms for Eric to move forward with?
I apologize. You have me again, Jeannie Freeman for the record. I have a question related to, it's the Nevada IMAS AR signature form. I believe it was a PDF. It wasn't on the Excel sheet that was identified as item 8 that was there. When I look at the form, and again, this may just be an education piece for me, but when you get down to under section 1, where it talks about reimbursement percentage approved, and it says 50%, 75%, 100%, are those standard percentages, or is there an area where it may be something different? I mean, I'm familiar with usually FEMA doing a 75-25 and that type of thing, but are those just kind of the standard categories?
So this is John. Yeah, they are. So typically for the state to reimburse you based upon our disaster relief account, that's a 50-50 basis. So you're going to get 50% back. If you're applying through a declaration that was approved and the state was successful with the federal government, now you jump to that 75-25 category. If the costs are substantial, like Lanita referred to those tornadoes that just wiped out Kentucky, you're going to look at applying for 100% reimbursement, because you're never going to have that money in those rural community structures to recover from the costs that they're going to be expected to have in that 25% match. So those are the typical windows that are allowed. Things can always change. The whole point to this paperwork of putting together a package that you want to offer to somebody and they accept it is you're going to understand what your reimbursement rate is going to be before you deploy. So the cost to the location that you're responding to ultimately works it out as to what the reimbursement schedule is going to be back to the response agency. They sign off on it. They both agree that this is the expectation as to what they're going to get back. Again, on approved expenses, as Lanita spoke about, if you go out and you buy hundreds and hundreds of feet of fire hose and it was never pre-approved, you just bought yourself some new fire hose. But if it's agreed that this is needed for the incident and everything's pre-approved, that will all go onto that cost schedule for the 100% reimbursement, if that's what was agreed to before an agency deploys.
Great. Thank you, John, for that clarification.
Mike Heidemann, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say I really support you guys thinking about coming out to the various LEPCs and doing some type of presentation and training, especially out in the rurals, because we don't really use, these things a lot. And hearing guys like me drone on at these meetings gets really tiring. And then as I was raising and lowering my hand, because I'm kind of multitasking today, I was thinking, I don't know what the agenda looks like for the preparedness summit, but that may be a good avenue for a breakout session, as there'll be lots of different disciplines down there that could all benefit from that. So I don't know where we're at with that or how to tie that in or who to contact, but just a thought.
Notes are being taken right now, sir. Thank you. Good idea. We're working on that at 15:30. Any other comments, questions, concerns, rude remarks, Mr. Wilson? Okay, we will close item number 8. We'll move to item number 9. This is NAC 414 regulation review and reporting revisions. So we will discuss in the NAC 414A and see if anybody has any items that they would like to have changed. Obviously, we don't have to do anything until the year-end report, which is due June 30th. So we have this as a standing item on every agenda, so we can see if there is anything we want to adjust in that report or in the NAC 414A, if we should open up that document. So I'll open up the committee to see if there's anything that is worthy to keep track of besides the items that's already been discussed today, because it'll be a pretty robust, I think, year-end report next year on what the committee has done and uses of mutual aid throughout the state. we'll leave it at that and see if there's any comments on this standing item. Okay, hearing no feedback, obviously, we still got a couple months till that report's due, and we'll probably have 1 or 2 meetings before then. But the future chairman will have to write that report, so make sure that he's looking at the, he'll have to make sure he's looking at the minutes to incorporate all the good comments we were talking about, so we can continue to improve the process for the future. Okay, I'll move on to item number 10. This is closing public comment. Same rules as at the start. Discussion only, 3 minutes, comments not restricted. If you're on YouTube and like to say something, *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on Zoom land, all you gotta do is start talking. Any closing public comment?
Jeannie Freeman for the record. Public comment, Lanita reported on the different trainings and stuff that have been offered across the state, and making sure that they're, the trainings that are being offered are being identified by the jurisdictions of what they need. I just want to say that the quality of the trainings in the last year, since we've been able to come back to trainings with COVID, has really been heightened. It's been incredible. The classes I have taken, I know positions I absolutely don't want to be in based on those trainings. I know others that I want to do. But the quality of instructors and the quality of the classes, it's nice to see people face to face again, and to be able to do those classes together, and to actually have those in-class exercises and to do that. There seems to be a lot more engagement across the state, and I would say that that's attributed to the training officer lead for the state taking a more engaged approach across the state to get people doing that. So I just want to say thank you to all the efforts that Lanita and DEM have been putting into making our state stronger by making those classes more robust and better than what they have been in the past. I recently just retook my 300 class just because things have changed. And the first time I took it, it was a checkbox. And again, another phenomenal class, and 30 some people in the class, and the diversity and the instructors were just absolutely great. So I'm really pleased to see what's going on. It makes me more encouraged in sending more staff to do the trainings and the things that I need them to do, so that we can be a better prepared agency.
Awesome, thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, if you're on YouTube land, *6 to unmute yourself. Zoom land, you can talk. Hearing no public comment, we'll move to item number 11. This is a adjournment. I'll take a motion for adjournment and a second from somebody.
Kelly Echeverria, for the record, I motion to adjourn.
Mike,
I'm second. Or Mike.
A first from Kelly and a second from Jeremy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Awesome, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much for the help and the assistance.